All right, welcome to today's Graduate Diploma in Immigration and Citizenship Law January 2025 admission information session. We host these sessions to provide insight into the admission process for each individual admission cycle. And as we've come to the end of our September 2024 admission cycle, we want to obviously provide more information for the application that's open right now, which is January 2025. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to cover some GDipICL program highlights. We're going to talk about the history of the program, professional opportunities post-graduation, courses within the program, the delivery model, study plans, full-time and part-time, and tuition and fees. Then we're going to spend some time on the specific admission process. We're going to talk about all of the admission requirements for ones that are required from every single applicant and ones that are required from only a select few applicants. So we're going to talk about transcripts, references, and the personal statement of interest response. And then we're going to spend some time on English language proficiency test scores and the access pathway. We'll have some key takeaways for each of those sections. So just kind of key notes to jot for when you're preparing your application. And then we're going to talk specifically about the admission cycle, which is quickly coming to a close. We had this application open June 1, and it will close on end of day August 1st. So just in a few weeks here. At the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A, so I'll be able to answer your questions live. Please note, we're only going to be focusing on admission-related questions towards January 2025. If there's anybody here who was an applicant for September 2024, the application process is now concluded for that, and we're not going to provide answers to any questions you may have about a past application during this session. Before we begin, we want to continue on with our land acknowledgement. This is something we do at the beginning of every single session because it's important for us at Queen's to acknowledge the land where we are physically situated. So Queen's University is physically situated on unceded traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory, as well as myself, located here in Kingston, Ontario, in Canada. What we do with these land acknowledgements is to, like I mentioned, acknowledge the lands we are currently located on, the peoples who it was taken from by colonizers, and to continually support Indigenous students, learners, educators, and the community at large. We really do take a really important stance on indigeneity here at Queen's, and we have great organizations who support self-identifying Indigenous learners into all of our programs, the GDipICL program included. If you want to learn more about indigeneity at Queen's, please visit the Office of Indigenous Initiatives website or the Four Directions Indigenous Student Center. All right, so this is an introduction slide for myself. I am Don Ames. I'm the manager of admissions and recruitment. Been doing this now for, I believe it's 7 admission cycles. So we have been doing this for a while now, and hopefully the information I can impart to you today will help you understand the admission cycle for January 2025 and give you all of the information you need to make an informed decision as to if you're going to apply, what you need to provide, and when you need to apply by. But first, let's talk about the Graduate Diploma in Immigration and Citizenship Law, or GDipICL for short, the highlights of the program. So the program was founded between an agreement between Queen's University and the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants, or the CICC for short. The CICC is the governing body over the regulated Canadian immigration consultant profession. They are the group that issues the entry to practice exam, which you must take in order to become a practicing immigration consultant. And they were calling out for education partners. This program used to be delivered by a variety of different post-secondary institutions prior to the start of our program. But the CICC wanted to condense down and focus on one English language pathway and one French language pathway. Queen's University was the successful recipient of the English language pathway, so our program is taught entirely in English and entirely online. The French language program is provided by the University of Montreal. So if anybody needs a French language only program, definitely look at their program for admission consideration. Our program, as I've mentioned, is the only English language educational pathway to become eligible to write that entry to practice exam with the CICC. So if you are really interested in the profession of immigration consultancy, if you want to become an RCIC, if you want to help future Canadians immigrate into the country or currently located immigrants who need support on their permanent residency or citizenship applications to remain in the country, to support family members. This is the pathway for you. And like I've mentioned, we are delivered entirely online. There's no need to relocate to Canada or to travel to Queen's University physically to attend our program. You conduct this program where you are located. It's really key to note here that if you are internationally located, you need to operate within the Eastern Standard Time Zone, which I'll get into more when we come to tutorials later on in the slides, but that just is going to give you an idea of how you're going to navigate this program via an online setting. One of the final points I want to make here is just the instructors that are providing the education in our program. We have 9 courses in total, and each of those courses are provided by a world-renowned instructor group that are just amazing in what they do within the immigration and citizenship ecosystem. They are current immigration consultants, current lawyers, people who have literally written the textbook for the courses are educating you. And we're really proud of the education that we do offer. And we're seeing huge successes when it comes to our graduates completing the EPE, getting out into the immigration ecosystem, and really making a positive impact for future Canadians coming into the country. So let's talk about what that sort of post-graduation focus should be. Obviously, that's very, very distant in the future. We're looking at the application process for a January start, but this is always important to kind of think about what do you do with this program's education beyond graduation. Obviously, the number one pathway that we see the majority of our applicants are interested in is to become a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, or an RCIC for short. These are individuals who have graduated from our program, who have challenged the EPE and completed it. We have a very high pass rate, as I've already mentioned. And once you pass the EPE, you're immediately given the designation of an RCIC-IRB, which allows you to begin practice in the immigration ecosystem. Whether that is through a pre-existing firm that does immigration consultancy, or if you're looking to go out on your own and create your own firm, we provide you with the education and knowledge and experience necessary to be successful as an RCIC. RCICs can practice globally. The CICC no longer requires citizenship to be an RCIC. So again, think about that. If you are located internationally, if you're practicing internationally, we review all applications equally when it comes to our admissions process. What I do encourage you to do is to look up the CICC's website to learn more about the RCIC designation. What are the essential competencies for practice as an immigration consultant? Because we've modeled our program off of those essential competencies. I'll provide the link to that website afterwards, but again, it just gives you that sense of you're not only thinking about this application cycle for the admission process and to get into the program, you should be thinking about beyond as well. And speaking about that, in addition to not only thinking about becoming an RCIC, there are plenty of other opportunities to leverage the education that you are gaining within this program for a successful professional experience. We see a lot of individuals come through our doors who are interested in government or NGO work, who want to get into private industry that has an international employment focus. Those who want to get into policy development and implementation, maybe within or without government bodies, really making an impact for the future of immigration in Canada. We see a lot of current legal professionals, paralegals, lawyers, law clerks, individuals who want to expand their skill set. And we do see a lot of human resources professionals who are interested in taking this information back to their professional setting when they're dealing with things like retention of employees or international recruitment. The materials you're going to learn in this program are all integral when thinking about how impactful immigration is on the economy. We've just learned how much the immigration is impacting the economy with numbers like 102% of our economic growth is related to immigration. I mean, that's beyond what was expected. It's such a huge impact. And for any professional who really has a sense of what is necessary to keep our economy running or businesses in place, this knowledge is going to be really integral to support any professional activities. We also see that this is also a prime opportunity for individuals who maybe aren't interested in the entire program, but need to gain some professional development hours to take some of our courses in the program. So we do have CPD hours associated with each course, and you should check out our website and the courses link to learn more about how many hours are associated with each of our courses. So let's talk a little bit about the courses and the structure of the program. So we have 9 courses in total, as I've already mentioned, delivered entirely online. And full-time students for our program will complete 3 courses per term across 3 consecutive terms, completing the program if you begin in January, just about in the middle of December 2025. The majority of studies done within our program are conducted via self-directed learning opportunities. Those are things that are done outside of a traditional classroom setting that don't require a certain time frame that you need to abide by. That's readings, online assignments, and activities. There are quizzes associated with our courses, but no final exam. So there will be times that you'll need to submit those by. But again, you can kind of do those on your own time. But the time commitment will be considerable for all students, not just full-time, but also part-time students. So be aware that you'll have to understand your time management abilities, your ability to kind of self-regulate your focus when it comes to our program, and just understand how intensive this program is. We tell students to treat the education that they're going to be participating in our program like a full-time job. And it's probably important for me to note here that there are regulations in place, not only by the GDipICL, but also by the School of Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs Office that governs the majority of graduate programs at Queen's that restrict full-time employment while being a full-time student. So you'd have to reduce down your professional commitments, or you'll have to consider the part-time pathway in order to become or to graduate and potentially become an RCIC in the future. So you can see from the study plan here, the program is very structured. You start from ICL 810 and you continue on through ICL 890 in succession in each of the terms. We don't have a buffet style program when it comes to the course selection. Everything is pre-designed for our students for their success. Part-time studies are just slightly different. You can see that there are 3 additional terms. So a part-time student will typically complete the program in 6 consecutive terms. So starting in January 2025, you'll complete in mid-December 2026. So 2 years. And you can see that the only difference between the full-time and the part-time study plan are the number of courses you take per year. So it's a little bit different. We've prioritized the courses that we can kind of front load in the part-time study plan, and then prioritize the ones that are more important and more integral to your understanding later on in the program. So 1 to 2 courses per term, again, 6 consecutive terms, completing the program in about 2 years. But the commitments within each of the courses are exactly the same, whether you are a full-time student or a part-time student. So when you start your program, you can see here, this is how the structure is for a full-time student. You'll take ICL 810 as the first course for the first 6 weeks. You'll do all of the readings, all the assignments, quizzes, what's required of you in that course. And then once you complete it, you'll take ICL 820 and 830 concurrently afterwards for the rest of the term. Part-time students are very, very similar. Again, you'll start with 810, the same readings, the same assignments, the same course requirements, and then you'll take 820 for the rest of the term. Obviously, you're not taking 830 because you're not a full-time student. Let's talk about tutorials, because those are a little bit different than the standard course structure. So as I've mentioned, much of the studies that are done in the program are done via self-directed learning opportunities, things that you do on your own time. There are live tutorials that are mandatory for attendance that do take place at set times and dates throughout your studies. Tutorials would take place either on weeknight evenings between 6 and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or on weekends midday between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's why I mentioned that if you are located internationally, you need to operate within the Eastern Standard Time Zone and know how that's going to affect you. Tutorials, like I mentioned, are mandatory. You will be live on Zoom with your instructor and a group of your fellow students. You'll interact with one another, so you'll have to have a good internet connection, sound technology. Sound, I mean like really good technology, as well as video and audio capabilities. So you should have a good microphone and a webcam that's going to show you on screen, because that's how you are marked as attending, that you are physically there. So there are 2 hours of tutorials per course per week, except for ICL 810 and 890, our bookend courses for the program. They each have an additional 1 hour tutorial that will take place on Tuesday evenings between 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, that's why it's really important to understand the commitment that this program has on your personal and professional endeavors, and that you're able to schedule your attendance in these courses correctly. You should be applying for our program under the study plan that you can best maintain. If you want to complete this program as fast as possible and you're able to commit the required full-time focus, apply as a full-time student. If you can't, consider the part-time study plan. All students, no matter their study plan, attend the same tutorials. And again, tutorials are mandatory. Missing a single tutorial is extremely impactful. There's one course in our program that's only 4 weeks in length. Missing one of those is 25% of your activities gone, and you will have a severe hindrance in completing that program successfully. So keep in mind the commitment that is required of our program when you're thinking about applying. The final point is tuition that I want to make here, and we'll cover that in the next few slides. So tuition is the same for all of our students, and our tuition and financing page always has up-to-date information regarding what the current tuition amount is. Now, our program is subject to change every single year, so just be aware that typically in September, that the tuition will potentially increase or be adjusted based on what you currently are studying. So for part-time students, because you have 2 years to complete, that means you might be subject to a tuition increase at the beginning of your 4th term. Full-time students, if you complete the program within the 3 terms, you should not be subject to that. Maybe you will, well, I guess as a January start, you will going into your final term. Be aware, make sure you constantly are updated via the tuition and financing page. One thing we've introduced is a tuition deposit of $400 that will secure your space once you receive an offer of admission. This tuition deposit is non-refundable, and it is applied towards your first term's tuition. So basically, it's just holding your space, and then we take that $400 and attribute it to the first term of tuition. Tuition is paid per term and only for the courses you are enrolled in that term. So full-time students will pay for 3 courses for a January start. Part-time students will pay for 2 courses for a January start, and sometimes they'll only have to pay for 1 course depending on the term. The Queen's Tuition Payment Plan will also assist in those who need kind of a greater breakdown or more time to pay their tuition. The tuition payment plan will allow for your tuition to be broken down into 4 equal installments, 1 per month of that given term. You apply for that via your Solus student account, so that's not something you really need to focus on right now. If you're offered admission, we'll provide that information to you. Some other things to note in regards to tuition: our program is not OSAP eligible. So make sure that you are aware that government funding in our province of Ontario is not available, which then does limit provincial funding availability across Canada. So we encourage you to still attempt, but there's no guarantee that you're outside of Ontario, you'll be provided provincial funding. There is an entrance bursary that is available for full-time applicants. You don't need an admission decision to apply for our bursary. It's provided to a limited number of individuals based on financial need. So you apply for our program, you then can complete the bursary application, submit it, and await word from the Student Awards Office once we get into our offers of admission if you've received the bursary or not. There are only a select few available. So again, make sure you apply and have all the information in. The application for the bursary is after the close of our application. So you have an additional 2 weeks to apply for the bursary once you've applied for our program. And we'll send out information to all of our applicants, reminding them of the requirement to, or not the requirement, but the encouragement to complete the bursary application as a full-time applicant. We also have some partnerships to share here. We have a partnership with RBC to offer our students a line of credit. One key thing here to note with the line of credit is that you should have a Canadian citizen cosigner to support your application. Also, we've just recently partnered with Windmill Microlending, which offers immigrants to Canada with no time frame on when you came to the country the opportunity to access a loan from their organization up to $15,000, which will cover components of the program: tuition, the application fee, living expenses, what have you. They're a brand new organization. We're really proud to have them on board with us now, and we encourage you to review all the available funding opportunities through our tuition and financing page. There's also the Ban-Re scholarship that's available for some applicants, or bursary, I believe it is. So just review the tuition and financing page to see what the requirements are for that bursary. The final point before we get into admission criteria is that you're here, which is great, and you're learning more about the program, but there's more that you should be doing in addition to attending these webinars. We encourage you to take our self-assessment. We want you to visit our web pages, attend future webinars, or if you have any additional questions, you can email us at immigrationdiploma@queensu.ca. We'd be more than happy to provide as much information as we can about the program to help you make an educated decision. Please note, though, that we don't do pre-assessment, so we don't accept documents via email and questions asking, am I eligible for the program? We will provide as much detail as we can about the admission criteria, but we will not assess a transcript without a completed and submitted application. Speaking of the application, let's go ahead and jump into the admission criteria. So we start off this section with things that every single person will need to provide via their application. And the first thing we want to mention are transcripts. The primary basis of the GDipICL program is a completed bachelor's degree with a B average from a recognized degree issuing university or equivalent institution. So we're a graduate level program at a pretty prestigious Canadian university. The requirements are that you have some sort of undergraduate degree completed before you begin our program. And a B average is a pretty big requirement. On a 4.3 scale, which is what Queen's utilizes for our admission purposes, a B is a 3.0. On a 4.0 scale, it's just around a 2.8. And we know that there are some international credentials that have varying levels of the way that they evaluate courses. What we can typically say is, while we can't provide a pre-assessment, if you've received a degree with a second division upper or higher, that should roughly meet the B average for our program. The way that we assess GPAs through the application is by you providing your transcripts for our assessment. You provide transcripts in PDF format via the application or after the application is submitted if you don't have those in your possession at this point. And we require transcripts from all previous post-secondary studies. That includes all undergraduate studies, all graduate level studies, so master's, MBA, graduate diplomas, PhD programs, all college studies at the SAGEP level or non-SAGEP level, any 2-year or 3-year diplomas, any graduate certificates or diplomas from college levels. Also, you should be providing additional documents for any studies that are a little bit non-traditional. So if you've completed any transfer credits. So let's start in with an example here. Say we have an applicant who studied 3 years at the University of Toronto, but they started their studies at the undergraduate level at Punjab University from India. If they've received transfer credit to the U of T, it will be noted on the U of T transcript, but we should also receive the Punjab University transcript as well as the University of Toronto transcript. So we need both of those transcripts to be uploaded with your application and identified via your application. That also includes any additional studies that you've done within that, maybe that University of Toronto study that you've done at other institutions. So study abroad or exchange programs, letter of permission studies, what have you. So say, for example, that same student who completed their bachelor's degree at the University of Toronto, but began at Punjab University, perhaps during their studies, they did a letter of permission or an exchange program at the University of British Columbia for a term. They transferred those courses back. We now need to see transcripts from Punjab University, the University of Toronto, and UBC. This also applies to international schools as well. So if this individual maybe didn't go to UBC, but went to the University of Aberdeen, we would need to see that transcript as well. Also, any non-degree 4-credit studies. So say you are an individual who loves learning at the post-secondary level. You completed your bachelor's degree 20 years ago, but 10 years ago, you attended Athabasca University, an online university, to take a couple courses in an undergraduate non-degree program. We would need to see that transcript because everything applies towards your entire post-secondary career. The rule of thumb that we always note here when it comes to transcripts is if you've received credit from a post-secondary institution, document it on the application, and ensure that you have transcripts available in English PDF format. You can acquire PDFs of your transcripts by contacting your post-secondary institutions. If you possess copies of your transcripts, you can scan them in really good quality, black and white, and upload those with the application. It's really important that you include all pages of your documents and all years. This is not a program where we only look at the last 2 years or a final year for our assessment. We review everything. So if you studied a 3-year program, include all 3 years. If you studied 8 individual terms, include all 8 terms in your transcript submission. Let's take an example of what we're looking at for transcripts. Now, this is a very stereotypical North American summary transcript. It has all of the different terms listed there, but there's unique characteristics that need to be on every single transcript, no matter where they come from for our assessment. It needs to have some sort of signature or documented notification that it was approved for or by the institution. There should be a seal or watermark located somewhere on your transcript. It has the name of the institution, but the real key component here are these sections. You can see here that this is a section that indicates the study term that this student participated in. It lists what the study term is here. This is a summer 2015, I believe that says. It outlines the courses taken, the names of the courses, the course codes, and it also outlines the grades achieved and the credit associated with each of those courses. This is what we need to see from everybody. This is how we do our assessment on your overall GPA at the undergraduate level, graduate level, and then combining those together. Make sure your documents have these available. If you don't have them and you can't acquire them, you are going to have these documents sent on your behalf directly to the School of Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs office, which is the group that issues the application that we utilize for our program. International credentials or international students who have international credentials, anybody who studied outside of Canada should also include a degree or diploma certificate, something that indicates your name, the program you completed, and the date it was conferred, as well as a signature or something official from that institution. We need to see that your program was completed so that we can provide you with a proper assessment. And the way that the SGSPA office is notified of that is through submission of this document. Sometimes it's noted on a transcript, but international credentials, it's usually not. So make sure you also include your degree or diploma certificate with your transcripts. These are some documents we don't accept, though, for our review process. This is an example of a printout of a student account. Very unofficial. It's not useful for our assessment. We will not accept these for our official review. You will have to have an official transcript then sent on your behalf to the School of Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs office. Also, any document that is marked as unofficial, it will be marked as unacceptable for the admission review process, and you'll have to have an official document submitted. Also, photographs of transcripts are not acceptable. It's really unclear. Typically, they're zoomed very far out, and when we zoom in to try and do our assessment, it's blurry and we can't utilize it. If you possess your own copies of transcripts, scan them. Take them to the library or an office supply store. Have really good quality scans done in black and white. If there's information on the reverse side of your transcript, please include 1 page of that for our review as well. Don't photograph them. We'll have to then await a proper delivery of your transcript, which may delay our review process of your application. Another key thing here is that we know that a lot of individuals have third-party assessments done of their transcripts, maybe when they're immigrating to Canada or applying for another program. So WES, ICAS, ECE, University of Toronto, we don't accept those in place of official transcripts. You can have those documents uploaded on your behalf along with your transcript for our review, but they will not take the place of official transcripts. So make sure you have all of your documents, all of your transcripts ready to go with your application. So key takeaways here in this regard, remember, all transcripts, all studies, all years. Anything that you've done at one institution, multiple different institutions, anything that was transfer credit, study abroad, exchange program, letter of permission, make sure you include all of that information with your PDFs for upload with the application. English PDF format is the preferred format when you are uploading with your application. If you can't have your documents ready to go when you apply, you can upload them within the SGSPA application system later, or have them sent on your behalf directly to their office via email, fax, or physical mail by your previous post-secondary institution. We understand that there are many people who are interested in our program who have international credentials. Begin the process to acquire documents now. The longer you wait, the less likely it is that we are going to receive the documents in time by the September 1st document deadline, and you may not be reviewable based on that status. I think that pretty much covers transcripts. If you have any questions, we will answer those in the Q&A section once we get to them at the end of the session. But let's continue on with admission criteria that every single applicant needs to provide. The next section is all about references. Our application requires 2 references for our review. References can be either professional or academic in nature. Every single applicant is going to have to provide 1 professional reference. And academic references are only required from a certain type of applicant. Those are individuals who have studied within a post-secondary program within 2 years from the month of their application. So if you are applying in the next couple of weeks, and if you have not studied anything at a post-secondary level since July 2022, you will need to provide 2 professional references. If you were a part of a post-secondary program since July 2022, so say, for example, you finished up your bachelor's degree in April 2023, you will need to provide 1 professional reference and 1 academic reference from your most recent studies. It can't be from a past study. So say, for example, we have an individual who completed their bachelor's degree in 2010, and then they studied a master's program, finishing that up in 2023. We would need to see an academic reference from the most recent study, not from the bachelor's degree studies back in 2010. Has to be from the most recent. Let's talk about what makes up a suitable professional reference. A suitable professional reference is a current or former manager or supervisor from a domestic or international place of business or volunteer work, either full-time or part-time. An academic or a professional reference is someone who identifies themselves as your manager or supervisor. It's someone who's going to provide information about your abilities in a professional setting. It's someone who you've been in contact with and has agreed to fill out the form on your behalf and will provide it back to the SGSPA office by the document deadline of September 1st. Who's not a suitable professional reference is a colleague, a coworker, a friend, a peer, an equal, or someone with no supervisory or managerial duties over you. We can't utilize that reference as a professional reference for our program. It should also not be someone from a different department who has no interaction with you in a professional setting. You should be able to rely on this reference to provide information on your behalf, because the number one reason we see applications go unreviewed is because a reference document was not received by your reference. So that's why we encourage you to talk to them ahead of time and ensure that they agree to complete the form and submit it on your behalf. The same thing goes for academic references. There's a lot of similarities between the two. A suitable academic reference is a current or former professor, instructor, or teaching assistant, again, from a domestic or international post-secondary institution from within 2 years from the month of your application. It's someone who can identify your skill set within an academic setting. Again, someone you're in contact with who agrees to fill out the form and submit it in a timely manner on your behalf. Who's not a suitable academic reference? A classmate with no academic, supervisory, or managerial duties over you. Someone from a post-secondary institution older than 2 years, so anything beyond July 2022. Someone who's not going to provide the information, someone you're not in contact with, someone you can't rely on to get that information back to the SGSPA office for your application. So keep in mind what the requirements are and reach out to the appropriate referees. Now, how do you deliver references for your application? The short answer is you don't. What you do is you should be in contact with your referees and gathering their contact information, because then within the application, you enter in your 2 references' contact information, their names, their email addresses, their current job titles, current locations, and their telephone numbers. Once you enter in that information into the system, submit and pay for your application, emails are automatically sent out to the email addresses that you listed in the reference section. So make sure that they are spelt correctly. Your referees will then receive the emails. They may go to the junk or spam folders of those email addresses. So make sure you communicate with your reference and tell them when you've submitted your application. Because it's an automated process, it should happen within minutes of you submitting and paying for your application. If you don't have this information for your referees, gather it now and make sure it's entered into your application. That's the key #1 takeaway when it comes to our reference section. Talk to your references ahead of time, confirm they are comfortable providing this information, and that they'll give you a good reference. Make sure that they check their junk and spam folders, or they confirm that they've received the document with you, but you are to have no interaction with that form beyond that. You should not be seeing the form or talking to your reference about what they should be entering into that document. They should be doing that on their own. They then submit it back to the SGSPA office, and you can track their submissions by logging into your application via the application system. So if you're seeing that it's getting real close to that September 1st deadline, you need to nudge your referees and get them to submit the documents. If they didn't receive the email, contact the SGSPA office for additional assistance. The final point that every single applicant is going to have to provide with their application is the personal statement of interest response. This is where you tell us more about you. You get to explain your capabilities, the way that you're going to complete this program, how you're going to be successful, and your motivation for the program. This is your only opportunity to submit this statement. We don't accept it afterwards. You need to build it into your application utilizing the text box and the 400-word or 2,000 character limit, whichever one comes first, in order to tell us about yourself. Use the word limit in full. 1 or 2 sentences are not going to cut it for this section. Again, the amount of effort that you put into this is going to show when we review and assess your application in full. So make sure you are taking the time to read the question in full, to respond to it, and complete the statement. Also note that you should be writing this yourself. No additional assistance, either from individuals or AI generation technology. Do not use anything like that to help with this statement. It's very common. It's very easy for us to flag. And there will be repercussions for individuals who utilize AI generation technology or outside assistance to submit this statement. We want to hear from you. This is a great opportunity for you to tell us about yourself. All right, now we're going to start drifting into the areas where some applicants will need to provide this and others won't. The #1 thing that we always talk about here is the English Language Proficiency Test Score requirements, or ELPT scores. Now, many applicants will have to provide an ELPT score, and we kind of look at our application as every single applicant needs to provide an ELPT score, but there are exemption criteria that removes that requirement from some. The exemption criteria are all outlined on our website, but we'll go through each of those individual exemption criteria within this presentation. This is a part of the admission review process. It is a document that is required by the September 1st deadline. It is not something that we will issue a conditional offer of admission based on the submission of this. It is not something you submit during your studies. It's not something you submit in preparation for the entry to practice exam with the CICC. The CICC actually no longer requires an ELPT score to write the EPE because everybody coming through our program has met the English language proficiency requirement. So we require an approved ELPT score for our admission assessment. We accept 4 different types of ELPTs at this point. We accept KLCE, IELTS Academic, TOEFL IBT or internet-based test, and TOEFL PBT or paper-based test. Those first 3, we accept both the test center version and the online version. The TOEFL PBT is only located in certain geographic locations, and it's only a test center version. We barely see that come across our desks. Typically, we will see the first 3. Also, there are specific scores you need to meet for each of those ELPTs. For KLCE, it's an overall score of 70 with no band below 70. With IELTS Academic, it's an overall score of 7.0 with no band below 7.0. For TOEFL IBT, it's an overall score of 101 with no band below 25 out of 30, except for listening, which needs to be no lower than 26 out of 30. And TOEFL PBT, it's an overall score of 607. There are no exceptions to the scores we accept for this program. So you may have an overall score of 8.0 on your IELTS test, but if your writing is at a 6.5, you're not eligible for admission consideration with your current score. You will have to improve that. So make sure you are understanding what these score commitments are when you are applying for the program. Also, we don't accept other tests. We don't accept CELPIP, CLB, Duolingo, Pearson, IELTS General, or any other test at this current time. There's no exceptions to the tests we accept. We will not allow for an individual to submit one of the unapproved tests. You need to submit either a KLCE, IELTS Academic, TOEFL IBT, or TOEFL PBT score. And with IELTS, the one skill retake is available to individuals. If you currently have an ELPT score, it needs to be valid. And the way that it's validated is that it is within 2 years from the month of your application. So right now, anything older than July 2022 cannot be utilized for the ELPT submission requirement. So let's talk about the exemptions that we offer. There's 2 different exemptions for January applicants. The first exemption is that you self-identify as a native English speaker. The second exemption is that you meet the education exemption criteria. Now, there typically is a third exemption that we list here for our September applicants. It's the ESLA 150 English for Academic Purposes program that is not available for January applicants. So if you need the ESLA 150 pathway, you'll have to await the September 2025 admission cycle, which will open in the coming months. All right, let's take a look at the exemption criteria. You self-identify as a native English speaker. This is tricky because there's no hard and fast definition to tell us who is or isn't a native English speaker. But there are some criteria you should think about when selecting this response to to the ELPT question on the application. Think about if you were, think about if you were born and raised in a country where English is the official language. Think about if you have used nothing but English throughout your entire education, from elementary all the way through post-secondary. Think about if you have not taken any English as a second language course. And also think about if you are in constant communication and contact with English throughout your personal and professional activities. Those are really key components when it comes to thinking of yourself as a native English speaker. If you identify as a native English speaker, select that under the question that asks you how you need to proceed with your English language proficiency. That's the only way we're going to be able to determine if that's the exemption you are requesting. So there's a question, there are 4 responses. The first response is I self-identify as a native English speaker. If you do self-identify, select that option. Excuse me. Please note that at any point throughout the admission review process, even if you meet an exemption, the admission committee may request an ELPT score from you at any point. We will let you know via email, and we'll give you a time frame as to when that needs to be submitted. So Meeting the exemption does not mean that you are fully exempt all the way through. We will notify you if the exemption is no longer eligible for your application. Let's talk about the second exemption. This is the education exemption, and you need to meet the following criteria in order to be eligible for this review. That you have 4+ years of consecutive full-time academic study at a university in which English was the medium of instruction throughout your entirety of your studies. Let's break that down individually. 4+ years of consecutive study. That means no breaks within your program. A 3-year degree is not sufficient. Even if it is evaluated as the equivalent of a 4-year degree, it is still only 3 years of physical study in that program. You can combine programs together. So if you studied a Bachelor of Arts general bachelor's degree, but then you immediately went into a Bachelor of Education program for a year, that would be 4 years of consecutive study because there's only the natural gap of potentially a summer between the terms. Anything beyond one term of gap, like a full year or 2 terms, disrupts the consecutive nature of your studies and you're no longer eligible for the exemption. All of your studies also need to be full-time. If there was any reduction down to a part-time study plan for even a single term, you will not be eligible for the exemption. Studies have to have been conducted at a university, so make sure that that is reviewed. We're not utilizing college programs or non-university programs to take this into consideration. Also, you need to demonstrate that English was the medium of instruction of your studies. Sometimes that's listed on your transcript, sometimes it's not. If it is not, you will have to provide documented proof that indicates that your studies were full-time and or that you studied entirely in English. We do this review based off of your selection of that question response. So again, that same question, 4 different options. Option number 2 is I'm eligible for the education exemption. You submit your application with all of your documents. We will assess your transcripts, but you should also try to include medium of instruction letters with your application. This is an example of what we're looking for. This is an official letter from the University of Calcutta. It's signed by somebody with this institution, and it indicates that the medium of instruction was English. This is what we need to see in order to help us demonstrate that you do meet the education exemption. One thing to note here with this example is that this is only a 2-year program. So ideally, this applicant combined this letter with another letter, which covered the 4-year program, but if it's only 3 years or fewer, it doesn't count towards the exemption process. You have to have 4+ years of consecutive full-time academic study at a university or multiple universities. Key takeaways. If you don't meet an exemption, please ensure that you list on the application, I must submit an ELPT score. Also, make sure you select the appropriate exemption if you are requesting an exemption. If you meet both, pick the one that best applies to you. If you only meet the education, do not select native English speaker. Reverse is also the same. If you are requesting an exemption based on you are a native English speaker, do not select the education exemption. Make sure you provide all of your information, all the transcripts, that letter, the medium of instruction letter to help us kind of evaluate your eligibility. If you don't meet the exemption criteria, we will contact you and you will have to submit an ELPT score, no exception. The exemption review decision is non-appealable, and we will indicate that on the email as to what's required to move forward with your application. Also, we don't consider any additional exemptions outside of what I've already covered. We don't review professional experience, where you did your studies, your citizenship, or your geographic location. None of those can be applicable towards the exemption. Please don't request additional consideration. If your ELPT score is valid, it's from July 2022 up until now, we can utilize it. Anything older than June 2022 cannot be utilized. And also make sure it is one of the approved tests. This score needs to be submitted by September 1st. So if you know that you're going to apply for the program and you must submit an ELPT score, begin working on this process now. The final point that I want to make before we hit the Q&A section is about the access pathway. Queens is committed to supporting equity-seeking individuals gaining admission to our program and other programs across campus based on additional criteria. Perhaps you are an individual who faced some sort of life circumstance or barrier to post-secondary studies, or something that hindered your post-secondary studies, and it then deemed that you are no longer able to meet the academic admission criteria of our program. Perhaps you completed a bachelor's degree, but you didn't get that B average. Maybe you completed some undergraduate studies at the university level, but you couldn't complete the entire program. If that is the case, and you possess 5+ years of relevant professional experience in a related field to law and/or immigration, you may be eligible under our access pathway. So there is a question on the application. It asks you to select whether you are interested in being considered under the access pathway. Because you meet those barriers and you don't have the bachelor's degree average, or you have some university study but don't have the full degree, you will then have to submit a special circumstances statement. And then you'll also have to provide us with a resume or CV that highlights all of your professional experience. The resume is emailed to us after you complete your application. You email it to immigrationdiploma@queensu.ca, include your application reference number. The statement itself, though, is built into the application. It's under the special circumstances section of the application, and you have a short text box to provide us with the rationale, the barriers, the things that prevented you from meeting the admission criteria. The one thing to really note with this statement is it's not about what you are currently facing. We receive a lot of access statements that talk about current barriers, financial, personal, medical, professionally. That's not what the access pathway is for. It's to review your past experience in a post-secondary program at a university and the rationales to what the barriers were at that time. So make sure your response is written correctly, it's written well, and it answers the question, what are those issues that you face that would identify you under that equity-seeking pathway to be eligible for the access pathway? So really make sure that you know that this is not a pathway for everybody. If you simply didn't meet the academic requirement for reasons that were completely controllable by you, you missed a bunch of courses, you just didn't attend school, you had other priorities, that's not the pathway for you. Again, it needs to be, those barriers need to be identified within your statement. So make sure you provide the statement, you provide your transcripts, you provide the resume, and that you have those 5 years of relevant professional experience related to law and/or immigration work. You submit the CV afterwards, you submit your statement during the application process with your application. Again, you've got about 200 words or 1,200 characters maximum to tell us about those barriers faced. It's not for everybody. Make sure it's appropriate for you. All right, we're going to jump into the Q&A here, but just about our current admission cycle, our application is open for January 2025. It will close at the end of day August 1st. Documents need to be submitted by September 1st, however. So you can apply for the program and continue to gather documents up until September 1st. And you can upload those or send them to the SGSPA office on your behalf. Again, the ELPT is really important. Make sure you're working on that now if you know you're going to have to submit it. There's no refunds of the application fee, and your application is non-transferable. So make sure you are applying for the correct study plan that best suits your needs, and that you're only applying for the January 2025 intake. One thing that we do encourage is that you complete the professional experience section, no matter whether you were applying via the access pathway or not. Just gives us a little bit more insight into your professional experience. All right, let's go ahead and open up the Q&A. One of the key things here to note is that we're asking people to submit one question at a time. Don't spam your questions. We're going to try and get to everybody here today. We're also asking you to only ask one question within your block and not to provide personal information in the question. We don't accept phone numbers, addresses, email addresses, and don't try to solicit any information from other individuals in the session. Also, you can upvote other people's questions. So if you see a question that you really want answered, give it a thumbs up. and we will answer those. I will answer those directly, but I've got Valerie here from my admissions team who's going to answer some questions here in writing. So let's go ahead and open up that, and we will see what is most popular here. Let's see, 2 questions in one. We will go ahead and answer that. What would be the conflict of interest areas to be considered with this program? Example, an interpreter of IRB can attend this program. Will there be ELPT requirements for the RCIC college evaluation procedure after completing the GDIP? So 2 questions in one. I'll answer the second question first. As I mentioned, there is no ELPT requirement by the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants if you've completed our program. So our admission process covers the ELPT requirement. It's not required later. Conflict of interest areas, there really shouldn't be any, aside from individuals who are practicing immigration consultancy illegally. If you are not a regulated Canadian immigration consultant and have no credentials in that way, you should not be practicing immigration consultancy or working on anything that would be covered by a professional, an RCIC. So make sure that that is not within your activities. You should not be doing that. It is a significant breach of law, and that will severely hinder any application. An interpreter is not something that you're doing officially as a consultant. So that should be acceptable, and it would be relevant professional experience towards your entry into the program. Let's see if there's any. If the education, oh, sorry, I just lost this question. If the education received outside of Canada, should it be in law? Sorry, I'm losing the question here. Should it be in law or can be any studies, for example, linguistics? We accept any studies into our program. The study that you've conducted is not vital to the program. We have a lot of individuals who have studied law. That's, of course, extremely important, but that's not the only people who get admission into our program. Arts, science, engineering, nursing, commerce, we review every single application equally, and we review all credentials on the same playing field because we know that there are individuals getting into our program and this is their interested second or third career, or maybe this is their primary focus. Maybe they got into a program that they weren't passionate about, but they did then found our program at a later date. We're not going to hinder you if you didn't study law. We welcome everybody at all levels. Doesn't matter, bachelor's, master's, provided that you have those studies completed, we'll review them. Do we need to apply for a study permit? Do we need attestation letter? No. Our program, because it is delivered entirely online, there is no in-person component, and there's no requirement for our students to have a study or a visa or permit. Also note, our program is not PGWP eligible. All right. In the transcript section, it's noted that third-party assessments for transcripts are not allowed. Does this restrict also apply to third-party distributors? My university issues transcripts exclusively through National Student Clearinghouse. Would this be acceptable? Good question. No, the third-party assessments are what the restriction are. So, for example, we know that a lot of individuals who come into Canada, they need to get their international credentials assessed by, say, WES. WES reviews credentials, determines what the equivalency is to Canadian institutions and their credentials, number of years, and also WES can also, I believe, for an additional fee, provide a breakdown of the grades. That is what we were talking about in regards to third-party assessments. Third-party delivery is completely fine. We know a lot of institutions utilize MyCreds. National Student Clearinghouse sounds like that is another option. If you need to have your transcript delivered, that's fine. That's just a third-party delivery service. They are not doing any assessment or any sort of, this is the equivalent of your program. They're just the messenger. That's completely fine. Somebody's asking, how do we help with employment opportunities after this program? That's a very good question. Students are able to access career services at Queen's. Obviously, the online component makes it a little bit tricky, but there are great services via our career services department. They help with resume samples and templates and things along those lines. For our students specifically, We encourage them all students to join our LinkedIn group, because we then provide postings from immigration organizations that are seeking licensed professionals. So we assist in that regard. The CICC does a lot to assist with individuals who then complete our program and write the EPE. There's a mentorship program. There's some really great resources there. And of course, there's great organizations like GDipICL that you can join up to understand the support that's out there for current practicing professionals. I believe I've also just covered this question about networking opportunities with relevant immigration firms, organizations throughout the course. Students who are in our program can access GDipIC's student fees or student registration fee. So it's lower. You can participate in activities with them. So that's the primary networking outside of our program. And then within, obviously, you're interacting with your instructors, people who are within the industry right now. And we've heard from alumni talk about those connections that they continue on with their instructors outside of the program and with their fellow students. So there's a lot of really great resourcing that's available to people within and outside the program. I have the letters for English as first language from my college, as I have done bachelor's 3 years and master's 3 years. Will it be considered? It depends. You will have to provide all the documents, and we will consider you. You can select that on your application. But one thing to note here, you say you have a 3-year bachelor's and a 3-year master's. If there is a break in studies, they are no longer individually eligible or combined eligible, because you need 4+ years. So if you did your bachelor's degree from 2007 to 2010, and you did your master's studies from 2012 to 2015, there's that 2-year gap between, and it's no longer eligible for the exemption criteria. If your bachelor's degree is not from a recognized university, can we apply under the access pathway? So that's a very good question. We have a caveat that degree issuing institutions will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis if they are not accredited. So we will take a look at those and we will do our best with them. If it's not acceptable, you will probably be notified and asked to apply again once you have achieved the required official degree. Second part of that question, does certificate in law, CIL, considered as undergraduate degree post-secondary studies to meet the bachelor's degree requirements? So a little bit of maybe a misconception in that question. The Certificate in Law program is a great program provided by the Queen's Faculty of Law. It is an online part-time program. It is undergraduate studies. It's 4 courses in total, with the certificate being the completion. That's not a bachelor's degree, and it's not a base of admission, like a pathway into our program. That program will meet the access pathway requirement of having some undergraduate studies at a university. So access students, if you have a college program, for example, say you studied 2 years as a paralegal, got your paralegal diploma, and you've been working 7 years in the industry. If you don't have any undergraduate studies, the Certificate in Law program is a great opportunity. It's online. You'll kind of get a sense of what the GDip is all about. It's going to be more intensive in the GDip, but you'll still get that sense, and the knowledge you're gaining in those courses are going to be applicable to law knowledge in our program. So it would help with that access pathway. Alone, though, it doesn't meet the bachelor's degree requirement because it's not a bachelor's degree. All right, let's see if there's any other questions coming in. Somebody had a 71.5% in my graduation. I don't understand what graduation means. Are you saying from your bachelor's? Are you saying from your master's? Like there's some confusion in that question that isn't providing clarity around the question. However, we also don't do pre-assessments. We can't tell you what your percentage or your grade point average at your institution is in comparison to Queen's. We do that through our own assessment of the application. And like I've said, for individuals who are outside of Canada, if the degree is issued with a division or a ranking, typically second degree or second division upper and higher, first division with a distinction, those are typically B averages. So while we can't provide exact resourcing, we would encourage you to take that into consideration. And again, that's why we tell you about the 4.0 scale. Converting a 4.3 scale to a 4.0 drops the B requirement from a 3 to about a 2.8. There are unofficial resources that you can utilize for international and domestic reviews that you should take a look at for consideration. We're not saying they're official. We're not saying they're viable, but it will give you a sense of what your GPA will be on either a 4 or a 4.3 scale. So that will aid in the process. If you are unsure, if you face barriers and you have that 5+ years of relevant experience, the bachelor or the access pathway may be eligible for you. Somebody's in Saskatchewan. Can I apply for student loans? Saskatchewan Student Loan Handbook says online full-time courses from outside Saskatchewan University is not eligible. That sounds like our program is not eligible because it's out of province and it is full-time or part-time dependent. It's online. So it sounds like it's not eligible. Also, because our program is not OSAP eligible in Ontario, the Pan-Canadian Agreement then stipulates that other provincial funding opportunities are typically restricted. So it's why we encourage you to review the RBC and the windmill microlending, as well as applying for our bursaries on campus. Somebody's just asking about native English speaking. You can ask that question by all means. As to the references, I've been in my own business for more than 20 years, so I do not have any employers as references. What are the other alternatives for that? Can my clients be my references? This is a tricky situation. We understand that entrepreneurship is readily available across, so I would encourage you to utilize volunteer experience. If you participated in any volunteer activities, or you should begin to volunteer so that you can gain some volunteer experience and have a volunteer supervisor who can provide a reference on your behalf, that would be one. Clients could be the other one. Find a high-profile client in a position of leadership within their organization that you have had professional interactions with that should meet. Beyond that, you should contact our office at immigrationdiploma@queensu.ca for further assistance. All right, I'm going to shut down the questions so that we can answer everybody's questions today. We'll stay behind a little bit here. If you are able to stick around, that's fantastic. Thank you for participating. There's the question, how many individuals are usually in the classes/course? We don't provide those resources out. We can tell you that typically class sizes, like the tutorials, are about 35 students per tutorial. Someone that from English language, official language, and he or she had diploma in paralegal and immigration consultant program in 2021, does he eligible for this admission? So that question sounds a little tricky just based on how it was written. So it sounds like you might not be eligible for the ELPT exemption. You should submit your information anyway, though. But a paralegal diploma program typically is not a viable basis of admission for the education exemption because it's done at a college level. Unless you've completed the Bachelor's of Paralegal Studies, there is a program with Humber College that would be reviewable for the education exemption. Also, immigration consultancy programs that were done prior to our program being in existence, typically they are done at the college level, usually the career college level. Those are not applicable to admission consideration or the exemption process. So this individual, it sounds like you're either going to have to be considered under the access pathway if you have that 5 years of relevant professional experience as a paralegal or in some sort of immigration capacity. If you don't have that, you're going to have to get your bachelor's degree. My education was in Ukraine, so it doesn't have any overall scores as usually have in the USA or Canada. Do I need to make ECA by West, for example, to evaluate this diploma to confirm this education? So while it may not have your standard numerical value associated with it, we do have means of assessing those. You should provide just your transcripts as is. You do not need to get West or a third-party assessment. I've completed the paralegal diploma program from a college in January 2024. Do I need to submit one academic reference or 2 professional references? Great question. That is 1 professional and 1 academic. You have studied within a post-secondary program within 2 years of your application. You should be getting that academic reference from that paralegal diploma program, somebody within that program to provide you an academic reference. Could you please explain what does it mean recognized institution? Do you have any list where to check this information, especially for those who studied abroad? Good question. We do have means to assess those within our program. It's nothing outwardly facing, but if you wanted to email us with the name of your institution, we could do a quick review and provide that information to you. immigrationdiploma@queensu.ca. Just to confirm, should I only send in my transcripts from the University of Ottawa, or should I send in a copy of my transcript from the University of Ottawa and a copy of my degree from the University of Ottawa? Bit of a confusing question. Are you asking if you should be providing your degree certificate? If so, domestic institutions to Canada they are listed on your transcript. You should only have to provide your transcript that notes on it the completion of your program. It's international studies that typically require the degree or diploma certificate. All right, a few more questions to go. Let's see what we can do. Somebody's asking why only Queen's University is offering this program in Canada. That is the agreement that the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants set out when they received their government funding to reevaluate the way that education was offered in this profession. They put out a call for proposals. We were the successful recipient. Do you accept scanned transcripts? I have ordered the transcript from my university a few years ago. Can I scan those transcripts and submit the scanned transcripts? Yes, but like I mentioned, they need to be good quality scans. So make sure you are taking them to some place that does scanning professionally. An office supply store typically has scanning functionality. Also, libraries can do that for you as well. If you possess your own scanner, that's fine as well. Just make sure they are really good quality. Black and white preferred to keep the file size low. And like I said, if there's reverse information on any of the pages that's the same, so like there's a GPA legend, you can scan one of those and provide that. You don't need to scan a reverse side for every single page. Is the only time you will be in class via Zoom during the tutorials? What would an average weekly schedule look like for a full-time versus part-time student regarding these live tutorials? Yes. So the only time you will be in a classroom setting per se is during the tutorials, but the tutorials remain the exact same for full-time and part-time students. Everybody. So let's take an example of starting January 2025 as a full-time and a part-time student. Everybody will enter into the program and begin ICL 810, the foundational course, the first 6-week intensive course of our program. You will have 2 hours of tutorials every single week, either on Wednesdays or Thursday evenings between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. or weekends, either Saturday or Sunday. I don't know the exact day, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You will be in your tutorial with both full-time and part-time students because everybody attends the same tutorials. Also, there is a 1-hour tutorial every single week for the first 6 weeks on Tuesday evenings. So you'll be doing 3 hours of tutorials every single week for the first 6 weeks, totaling 18 hours of tutorials for ICL 810. Everybody does the same amount of tutorials. Everybody does the same amount of readings, no matter the study plan. The only difference between full-time and part-time is when ICL 810 is completed, after those 6 weeks, full-time students will take ICL 820 and 830. Part-time students will only take ICL 820. I've completed the immigration consultant diploma with honors in 2019 from CDI College. Because of the COVID situation and some family issues, I couldn't attend the EPE exam. What would be the options for me? Please let me know. Unfortunately, the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants put in place a 3-year window to allow for individuals who completed previous programs to attempt the EPE. 2019 graduation, it puts you outside of that window. You'd probably no longer be eligible to write the EPE without completing our program. And the admission criteria between our program and CDI College are probably a little bit different. If you don't have that undergraduate degree, you're going to have to obtain it. If you have been doing professional immigration work, maybe you've been working as an immigration assistant within a firm since 2019, that would bring you up to right around that 5 years of relevant professional experience in immigration. You might be eligible for the exemption or for the access pathway if you have some bachelor's degree studies or some undergraduate studies. If you don't, you should be considering our certificate in law program. So you'll have 4 courses of undergraduate studies once you complete that. or taking another maybe a term or two of undergraduate studies from another institution. Athabasca University is online. Maybe there's an in-person program you want to attend, but you have to have some undergraduate studies at the university level in order to then be considered as an access pathway candidate. So maybe January 2025 isn't going to be your admission cycle. Perhaps you're looking at something in the future. Somebody is a permanent resident living in Saskatchewan. Can I apply for student loans? I believe I've already answered that question. You can try to apply for student loans, but you should be working with the student loan office to determine what your eligibility is for our program. What about PhD scholarships? No idea what that is referencing. This is not a PhD program. We don't have scholarships for our program, and we don't have specific scholarships for individuals who have completed a PhD. When you say recognized institutions, do you just mean Canadian universities? No, we mean internationally recognized as well. So we review the entire globe for eligibility in the degree issuing accreditation of a university. We will receive applications from India, from Nigeria, from Australia, the UK, Brazil, Mexico, everywhere. And we will take a look at those institutions to ensure that they are degree issuing, because it's very similar to Canada. There are universities, there are private institutions, there are colleges, there are private colleges. They all have differing levels of ability to issue degrees. And we have ways of assessing what the capacity is for each of those institutions within each of those countries. This is not a program that's just limited to Canada. Final question here from me. The education was in Ukraine. I believe we've already answered that question there. So we will await the final written response here it's all done. We are done with the webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. If you want to learn more about the program, I put links in the chat for your review. Also, immigrationdiploma.ca is our website. You can also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/QueensLawGDipICL. Learn more about the program. Understand if this program is right for you. We are accepting applications for January 2025 up until the end of day August 1st, but you will have until September 1st if you've applied to submit your documents. So prepare, and we'd love to see your application for our admission consideration. So in the meantime, we will be hosting additional webinars throughout the month. So if you want to learn more, you're more than happy to meet up with me for a future webinar. So thank you very much for attending, everybody. Have yourself a great day.